Jeff, it looks like you might need to enable the chat. I don't see that it is available for the participants.
Okay. Sophia, do you know how to do that?
Yeah, I'll get it going.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again for joining us. We are getting that chat enabled. In the meantime, you can also use the Q&A. And I'm Chris White with Frontier Energy, and I'll be leading you through most of this discussion today, but I think we're going to start off with Dan. So Dan, if you'd like to turn your camera on and jump in, I'm going to turn my camera off so we can all see his smiling face.
Actually, Chris, it's Jeff. I'll be doing the introduction.
Okay.
So we'll get started. Yeah. So yeah, this is being recorded just so everybody knows. My name is Jeff Railsback, and I am a customer account manager for Central Coast Community Energy. Sophia is on here as well. She is my counterpart, and she handles the northern counties. And then you've met Chris White with Frontier Energy, who will be doing the meat of our program tonight. Just real quick, our agenda, we're going to do a really fast introduction to CCCE, and then Chris will take over, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Chris does prefer to take questions as she's presenting. So if you enter the question in the chat, we'll be able to put you on the camera, and so you can ask her a question and hopefully maybe even have a little discussion. Anything we can't fit into that part of the program, we will save for the Q&A at the end. There we go. Central Coast Community Energy services 33 communities over 5 counties, including Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara. Our governing boards are comprised of representatives from these communities. About 90% of our customers are in the PG area, the other 10% in SCE territory. CCCE is a community choice aggregator, or CCA. Our job is to produce electricity supply, which is then transmitted by PG&E or SCE into your homes and businesses. Our mission is simple. We're working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with a goal of reaching 60% clean and renewable by 2025 and 100% clean and renewable by 2030. Both of these are well ahead of the state's timeline. We're not doing that slide, so we get to move right on to the chunk of the program here. And so today we're going to hear from Chris White from Frontier Energy. Recently brought them as a partner to help facilitate our EV charging infrastructure program, as well as we'll also be able to hear from members of our programs team. Again, if you have a questions, please put it in the chat, and then we'll try to fit it into the program, or we'll save it into the end. And so, Chris, it is your show.
Thanks so much, and thanks for joining us today. This presentation is called Public Charging Stations 101, and it really is basic level information to think about what you need to get started in offering public charging stations. We're going to cover quite a bit of information, but it's that kind of mile wide and inch deep. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about things, but I do encourage you to ask questions as we go through. If there is something you want to dig into a little bit more, please do so. And Sophia, I still only see chat for the host and panelists, so I'm not going to be able to share links. And I'm hoping that someone else will be able to share my links into the chat with all of our attendees. So as I post links into the chat, you'll be able to see them. I can see what you're writing to me. I just can't see to write things to you. So with that, let's just jump right in and go. Next slide, please, Jeff. So let's talk a little bit first about where people today charge their vehicles. So this shows you 4 different scenarios for plugging in. And for most people who live in California, that charging is at home. And while that picture shows a single family home, home is also a multifamily home, a mobile home, a condo, some unusual things. You know, in California, we have a surprising number of people who live on a boat, and that is considered their primary residence. But most folks are going to plug their cars in and get electricity at the place where they are sleeping overnight. We're also seeing an almost equal number of people, an increasing number of people charging at work. And particularly in the Central Coast area, some of that is because you have drivers that drive a long way to work. And they like to be able to charge up at night at home, charge in at work, because most of us run errands or go places after work. And most of us usually want to leave work with a full tank, or we'll fill up our tanks on the way home so we don't have to do it in the morning. Then we look at destination charging. Destination charging typically is faster charging. It's at the restaurant, it's at the movie theater, it's at the YMCA, it's the gym that you're going to, or if you're visiting someone at a medical care facility. En route charging right now is the smallest part of that pie. That is the quick stop as you go from here to there. So if you're going to Vegas, you're going to stop on the way for en route charging. And we typically see those more at the type of rest areas or off exit rest areas or gas stations, the same places that you would stop now for a quick stop, a sandwich, a chance to wash your hands and jump back in the car. Well, today we're really going to be talking about that home charging, workplace charging part of that pie, which again is our largest number of charging station users. So next slide, please, Jeff. And I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page with terms. I try to not devolve into the secret language of EVs, and I'm not going to read these to you, but I just want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. The one thing you will hear me say is dwell time. And that's the amount of time that you are parked with the key off and usually out of your vehicle. And that's what we're really looking for in charging stations. With gas stations, or the way that most of us get traditional fuels, it is a quick fill on your way to somewhere else. With charging, you are largely doing that at your destination. And so we really do look at the length of time that a person is dwelling at that place where they've keyed off their car. So just a few useful terms. I should also say that EVSE is kind of one of those weird acronyms. You'll see that written a bunch of different ways. So the S sometimes is a C, sometimes it's EVES. So whatever you see in there, always know that whatever that acronym is, it's talking about the charging station. So next slide, please, Jeff. And we'll talk just a little bit about what charging station levels mean as well. So every single electric vehicle can plug into a wall socket. Every car comes with a cord. You can plug it into any standard outlet. If that outlet is outside, we recommend that you're using something that is a weatherproof outlet. It is a very, very slow charge. So if you think about charging the battery is like filling up a kiddie pool with water, one of those little blue or yellow plastic pools that your kids or your dogs get in. If you were filling up the pool with level 1 charging, you were doing that from a kitchen faucet. It's going to take you a long time to fill it up, but it will fill up. Now, great reasons for doing this is it's very low cost installation. There are smart chargers. There are EVSEs that are portable, like the one that I'm showing there, that can make it go a little faster. But for many people who are traveling with their EVs 20 or 30 miles to work and back, slow charging overnight on a standard wall outlet is going to put back in the miles that they use every day. Then they're going to use the public charging stations when they need a bigger fill in their tank, in their battery. So that takes us to level 2 charging. Those are faster. So it can be just a plug in the wall, upgraded plug in the wall, but most often it is an EVSE, that electric vehicle service equipment. And you'll see a variety of pictures there. Sometimes it is a home EVSE, that's the one on the far right. But in public or in your parking lot at your multifamily building, you're either going to see something that hangs on the wall or sits on a pedestal. And there are many shapes that those pedestals can be. There are many ways in which they can be installed. And some of those are specific to the vendor, and sometimes it's what fits best on the site. And you're going to see some more pictures of those. But on the whole, those are going to add 12 to 24 miles of range per hour charged in. So if you're completely empty, you may be able to charge up in 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. There are various speeds of those chargers that have to do with the amps that the charging station puts out, but also the cars themselves have a governor. Some of them can accept a lot of water from the hose. Some of them need to slow the hose down. So again, going back to our swimming pool analogy, this is a little bit like filling up the kiddie pool with the garden hose in the backyard. It'll fill pretty fast, but you still have to wait a little while. Then we move up into the DC fast charging. This is always an EVSE. This is always a piece of equipment that you'll buy. They have multiple connectors for different styles of car batteries, the way that connects into the car itself. Again, they charge with the amps. You'll hear people talk about super high-speed DCFC, 50 amps, 75 amps, 150 amps. The more amps you have, the more expensive that charging station is going to be. But you will get a full charge in about 40 minutes, which is great. And that's why we see DCFCs more often at destinations and for that on-route charging than we see at a place where people dwell for several hours. So I am gonna stop for just a minute. And before we move on to how you do it, I wanna make sure that any questions anybody has about what we're talking about, what the secret language of EVs are, what the differences are between equipment and charging levels. So now I can see the whole chat. Thank you so much. All right, I do not see any questions. So remember, you can ask me a question anytime and we'll delve in a little bit more. So Jeff, on to the next slide, and let's talk about the next level up from just the charging level.
We did just get a question in, and I'll just read it to you because it's pretty simple. Is there a universal plug that all chargers use?
So if you mean the end of the charger that goes into the car, most cars are pretty universal on level 2. The only ones that aren't universal are Tesla vehicles, but they have an adapter. So when you put in a level 2 charger, it's standard across the board. Everybody uses it. Now there is a difference in the DC fast chargers. They have 2 different styles. And that is because some of the Japanese cars use a different connector, but that's why there are 2 connectors on the DCFC. They have 1 for each type. And again, Tesla has its own. So a Tesla car could use the charge point charger in this picture, but a Chevy Bolt can't use the Tesla charger right now. They have their own thing. And we really do focus on the ones that are more universal, the ones that we're showing in our pictures here. All right, I see Taylor says thank you. So let's talk a little bit about beyond the basics. And I mentioned in our secret language of EVs, the difference between dumb charging and smart charging. A dumb charger is one that's not connected to the internet. And because it's not connected to the internet, it has very limited things that it can do. It can put electrons into the car battery. Some of them have a few little bells and whistles in them, but it mostly just puts electricity into the car battery. When we do public charging or charging at a multifamily residence on level 2, we're talking about smart charging. So it will put electrons into the car battery. You can also program the time of day that vehicle charges. And that's really important because that helps us increase the amount of time that we have cars running when energy is more plentiful and cost lower and decrease the amount of time that they're charging on peak. Smart charging is also the way that you collect fees through a credit card or through an app or through a key fob, but you have to be connected to the internet to be able to collect fees. Then we move into the next level that gives you all of those, and then it adds some load management. What load management allows you to do is kind of distribute the energy. So I want you to think about if you have a parking lot with 4 charging stations and everybody's plugged in all the time, you can think about it a little bit like giving away Halloween candy, is that you don't give every child Halloween candy at the same moment. You go from one bag to the next bag to the next bag to the next bag. And that's kind of how load management software works. It distributes the electricity to make sure that everybody's getting their share, but it doesn't have everybody on the same circuit at the same moment. And that's a way that we can help keep your energy costs lower and avoid demand pricing, which is that little bonus amount you pay when you have used too much electricity. Then we move up even more to vehicle to building and vehicle to grid. And you may hear this called V2B or V2G or V2X. And that means that the charging station and the battery exchange information. And it can take energy from the battery and put it into the overall grid or into the building. Those are very much less common now. We certainly do see movement toward that, but in order for those things to work best, you need to know that the vehicle is going to be parked there. And for our personal cars or the cars that our residents and tenants are driving, it's kind of hard to get them to commit to be parked in one spot right when you need that electricity. So we're seeing more of this go for trucks and school buses and transit buses and garbage trucks that have very, very reliable schedules. So questions about these, one of the things that I want to mention too, we're really focused on that smart charging. So that's the part that we want to do because of the energy that we can, the data that we can get, the way that we can really help folks control their electricity bill. We're really focused on the smart charging. So questions on this before I move on? Okay, seeing none. Jeff, go right ahead. So how do you know which one you should choose for you or your property? Well, we have a variety of tools that we'll show you at the end that are on the website that help you do that. But the first thing to think about is your drivers. Who are the people that you are trying to serve? And you know, if it is your residents or your tenants or your employees, do they have access to charging somewhere else? Are you the right space for them to have a long dwell time where they're going to charge up 140 miles of range? Or are they going to need your chargers to put 30 back in that they've already used? That's part of how far they're driving and understanding what their pattern is. If your residents or tenants are living at your place, but driving every day to Santa Cruz or San Jose for work, that's a really long way. By the time that they come back, they're going to have a fairly depleted battery, and they might need a little bit faster charging in order to make sure they have that all back. You also really want to think about assigned parking spaces. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but knowing if someone is assigned a space rather than pick a space will also help you choose the charging level. And one thing to think about is if you have shared parking at a multifamily building, faster charging will enable people to charge and move so that people can share it. If you're assigned parking, you might want to go with a lower level of charging because that person's never going to move their car. When they come home at night, that's pretty much where they stay. You know, they eat dinner, put their jammies on and watch TV. They're not going to run outside at 9 p.m. and move their car so someone else can come in. And then the other part of it is not only thinking about how long your drivers dwell, but when are they there? Are they there from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m.? Or are your drivers mostly folks who work the night shift and they're there during the morning? Or is there a combination of those? The more times that we can look at how people move in and out of parking spots and make sure that they don't have to run outside in their jammies, that really helps us to figure out how many charging stations you need and how fast they need to be. Now, we find that for most properties, a 12-2 charger will be just fine. 12 kilowatt chargers, a nice sized garden hose. Most cars are going to take 12 kilowatts. It will fill them up and give them enough charge in 4 to 6 hours. If you really are a place with quick stops and people are in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, then a DC fast charger is going to be the one that you want. But we're going to work with you and figure that out. All right, questions about thinking about this? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on, Jeff. We're gonna pretend now that everybody has picked that 12 kilowatt level 2 charger. And by the way, most charging stations have 2 cords on them. And you'll see in my pictures here, sometimes it only has 1, but most of them that we look at have 2 cords on, 2 ports. So how do you know what spot in your parking lot you want to put this? Well, the first thing that we want to look at is how far is it from an electrical supply? Because every foot that we have to bore up concrete or dig a ditch or trench, that adds to the expense. So we certainly look to be as close to the electrical supply as possible. And most people think that that's a panel, but you're going to be surprised how much electrical supply there are in parking lots. We can find electrical supply in very unusual places. We can pull it from a power pole. A lot of times there's a junction box somewhere underneath the parking lot. So we're going to look for the closest power supply. We also have to make sure that those charging stations are going to comply with local codes. Sometimes that's a design code. One city that we work with does not allow charging, and it's not your cities. One city we work with does not allow public charging stations to be visible from the street. So they can't be on the street curb. So we look at what every city says with design codes, and sometimes the codes don't quite make sense. And when that comes up, we work with them to change their design codes. But we also look at ADA accessibility, and I have a slide about that. That's always a big question, so we're going to talk about that a little bit more. That third bullet point there, I want to describe those just a little bit. Safety. That is not safety from the equipment, but it's safety from other people. You know, we want to make sure that these charging stations are in visible places, that if somebody is out of their car at night, there's lighting, that they're visible from the street or a building. We don't want folks sitting in the dark. So that's both safety and visibility. We also really want to think about tripping hazards and ways in which people might get tangled in a cord or step on a curb. That middle picture there of the one on the hillside, I use that one, but that one to me is almost a tripping hazard. And the only reason it doesn't become a tripping hazard is it's really, really well lit. So people are not going to stumble on that curb at dark. And then we want to think about weather protection too. And weather protection is not just snow and rain. It also means standing in the hot sun. And we have seen some chargers that are placed in a, where the setting sun shines right on the keypad and the panel, and it will either burn out the screen or it can make the charging station hot to the touch. So we also want to think about that weather area. And then the last part is thinking about amenities. And amenities means, what does somebody do if they're there for 20 minutes or 40 minutes or 4 hours? Is there a bathroom? Can they play with their dog? Can they get out of the car and do something? Can they walk over and get coffee? What things are around there? Now, if it is their home, if we're talking about a multifamily property or some other shared use facility or a workplace, they're going to go to work or they're going to go home, put on their jammies and watch TV. So we don't have to think quite as much about amenities. But if you are a multifamily property and you're thinking about a station that would be in a common area near your swimming pool or near your community room, we also want to think about someone who might come on from the road need to charge? And is there something for them to do while they're standing there at your apartment complex? I have to say, I really like parks and playgrounds. Those are great areas for people to get out and do something while they're, particularly with their kids or dogs, while their car is charging. So questions about, this is slide 1 of 3 about selecting the spot. So let's go on to the next one, Jeff. And we'll talk a little about ADA compliance. This is a common topic with folks because we want to make sure that you are meeting what the state and federal government says. So the state of California has more stringent ADA requirements than federal. So we look really toward what we're specifying in state code. And I am going to put for you in the chat a link to a great presentation from the Division of State Architect that really explains more of this. But the important point that I want you to know is that the company that you're working with to design your charging station site knows all of this. And they're going to work with you to make sure that you're in compliance with ADA. So what the law says is if you have shared parking spaces, not assigned parking spaces, shared parking spaces, at least one of those charging ports has to be adjacent to an ADA van accessible parking spot. However, that spot does not need to be marked as ADA only. So there is a little variation there. And what that means is if you have parking spots already for the public and you have all of your ADA parking spaces there, but for whatever reason, and there are many of them, we can't add a charging station right there. If we add them on the other side of the parking lot, one of those spaces will have to be ADA van accessible. That's a width, that's a walkway, but it does not need to be marked as ADA only. So a non-ADA car could park there and use the charging station. So it is a little complicated. There are some other things with it as well. You'll see in my drawing that I've shown you, which is from the Division of the State Architect, we're showing how those charging stations are mounted on a pedestal in the parking space. That means that your parking spaces need to be a little longer. The State Architect says 108 inches minimum. Usually a parking space is 96. So we're making the space a little bit longer. If you mount it on the sidewalk, you still have to have 36 to 42 inches of clearance for ADA on the sidewalk. And so we're really conscientious about if we are mounting them on the sidewalk, did it take away sidewalk space? And in some areas, we've actually built a little berm or we've extended the sidewalk or made a loop go around it. But your site designer is going to know how to do this. So questions on this ADA. This is always a topic of interest. I am shocked. So that's great, but let's move on and talk about some examples of my favorite things, safety and comfort. Some of these are pictures that I borrowed. Some of these are pictures that I've taken myself of different places I've been. And I really tried to hide who the charging station vendor was. This is not a function of a vendor. This is a function of just learning as we go. So these are some things to not do. And a couple of these, like you'll see the one that's all spray painted with graffiti. We think a lot about cord management. And certainly since this one was installed, the charging station vendors have come up with better ways to do cord management. But we really want to avoid having cords where people can trip on them, drive on them, accidentally damage them. Obviously, you can tell from the two that are on the left, that's thinking about weather and how people could get into those. The one on the bottom is actually a site in the UK. That's not even in the US. but clearly someone didn't realize that that parking lot was in a low spot and didn't drain very well. On the top in the middle, that's a pretty new installation and it looks great. I love everything that they did with the pedestal that's actually set up on a curbside so people can pull up. What I don't think they thought about is how fast that bush is going to grow, and that hedge around there is going to really quickly overcome that charging station. And I think I would have cut that hedge all the way back. The bottom one is actually one I took. I should say that middle one is one I took as well. The bottom one is one I took at a parking garage that was so dark I had to leave my car lights on in order to see what I was doing. So that comes into being visible. This was in the very back of a hotel, and it was not the best place for a charging station. And then that last one is an example of what happens to the LED screen when it's exposed to the sun. And that's a sun exposure of just a couple of months. That was done straight in the setting sun. So Taylor asked, I see going back to ADA, is there a need for a ratio? Yes, there is. And that ratio is based upon the number of spots in your parking lot. And it really only comes into effect if you have 200 spots or more. And then the number of chargers that you're installing. For most folks, unless you are the Amtrak parking lot or have 200 spots or more, you just need to have one that is adjacent to an ADA van accessible spot. All right, Jeff, let's move on. I threw a lot of things at you, and so now I want to make it a little bit easier. This is a little bit of a score sheet that we have that we can make available to you about how to look at your site. And the first three are just pass fail. You know, does it have parking lot? How many parking spaces do you have? You know, parking space has to be marked for an EV charger, has to be marked as EV charging only, requirement by the state of California. And the way that it's marked is a local jurisdictional thing. Might be a sign, might be painting on the ground. If your parking lot has 2 parking spaces and they both become EV parking spaces, that's probably not, you know, that's going to be an impact to your parking. And maybe that's not the best plan. Maybe instead we look at something curbside. Site control is also the pass fail. And that means, are you able to install the charging station? This is probably not so applicable for you all as it is for a gas station or for a municipality. And then we also really look for accessibility. Is this parking space where the EV charging station would go, is it gate controlled? Is it only allowed by certain people? And again, this could be, if it is for your employees or for your residents, that may not be a fail for you. That may be a pass for you, is that accessibility to your residents. The next little bunch is about the things that the green ones are numerical scores based upon those things I just talked to you about. And we give you a score that starts with a 1, saying it's in the back of the hotel parking lot, there are no lights, there's no visibility, it's in an area with heavy traffic, that's probably not the best space. And up to a 5, which is well lit, visible from the street, not going to trip over a curb. So each one of those is a numerical score. And then the last little bit of it is thinking about the how close it is to an electrical panel. Do you need to completely repave your parking lot to do this? So many of these are things that we use with you when we start to do your site evaluation. And what we will do is look at various places in your parking lot to figure out the one that works the best for your use. And again, I want to point out something like a public restroom. If it's in an apartment building where everybody lives, everybody has a restroom. So we don't worry so much about that. It becomes different if we're looking at a city park that is miles and miles away from any place that might have a restroom. So comes in differently depending upon the property. So Taylor asked you about where can we find spots on the 200, info on the 200 spots or more. If that's about the ADA requirements, Taylor, that link that I popped in there will help. And then we can work with you one-on-one about that too. And we'll make sure that whatever we do for you, you are 100% ADA compliant. All right, let's go on to our next one. And this is also a big topic of conversation, is about how do you charge for charging? So the quick answer is you decide. Just like the grocery store decides how much milk costs, just like the gas station can decide how much gas costs. There is no entity out there that says this is the amount that you have to charge. It is up to you and your service provider to decide what you want to do. Now, within the state of California, we do consider electricity to be a fuel. And there are some regulations that say you have to charge by the kilowatt hour. You can't charge by the minute, you can't charge by the amp, you can't charge by any other thing. You have to charge by the kilowatt hour. And right now that law is into effect for all level 2 smart chargers that are installed. It will go into effect on January 1 for all DC fast chargers that are installed after that date. Not the ones already in the ground, just the ones that are being installed after that date. By 2025, all of the chargers that are already installed have to comply with the law. So again, you get to choose what that is. What I put on this list are showing you what different vendors in your area are charging for DC fast charging today. So you'll see that ChargePoint has that plus 25 cents a minute. In 2025, that has to go away. In 2023, they will not be allowed to do that for anything that's a new charging station. But you and your vendor, your installer will agree upon how you want to do that. Does that mean you have to charge money? It does not. In fact, many businesses, apartment buildings, parking lots offer level 2 charging as an amenity. It is a reason to come there. It is a reason to choose that. The electricity use on a daily basis is not that much money, and they just find that it's a benefit for their clients. I have only ever run into one free DC fast charger, and that was in Michigan. So I don't see those very often. And those of you who travel in places that I don't go may have a different experience. But it does, DC fast chargers use a lot of electricity. And we do typically see that we're looking for cost recovery on that. You see something in the Q&A. How do these prices compare to price per gallon of gas? Well, I can tell you, we've just done a little analysis on that, Eric. And for one of our multifamily customers, we find that filling up a battery, a car from empty to fully charged would cost their residents about $6 for electricity. And that's at like worst case scenario. So if they were to fill up their car with gas, it's around $85. At my office, we have a DC level 2 charger that many of the employees use, and it costs our landlord about $150 a month in electricity bill to charge all of the cars. And there are cars there, I would say 18 hours a day, 5 days a week, and sometimes there's somebody there on the weekend. Is it legal to charge a monthly charging fee, like charging cost $100 a month and up? Sort of. This is, I'm gonna, by the way, post into the chat right now too, the link to the regulation on the California Division of Measurement Standards website. And if you are not a regulatory rule reader, it's a little confusing. So is it legal to charge a monthly fee? Sort of. So let's talk about it in terms of if you were an apartment owner. If you own multifamily property Could you say, to use this charging station, I'm going to charge you $100 a month on top of your rent? You betcha. If you are a business owner and you want to offer charging to your employees and you want to say, if you're going to use my charger, it's $10 a month, can you do that? You betcha. But you have to be able to offer anybody else that same deal. So it's kind of, think about it like a cable subscription. If you include it, cable company says, this is what I charge people to have cable or cell phone service. You have to offer that to other people. What we typically see, a little bit different way to do it, is to say, we offer the public 43 cents a kilowatt hour, but for our employees or for our residents, we give them a credit toward that expense. That way you're offering the same price to everybody, but you are maybe giving a discount to the people that you really want to encourage to use charging stations. Now, if you are a municipality or a county or a government organization, none of this applies. When charging stations are installed on government property, they are exempt from the law. So if anybody's on here as with a government agency, let's talk separately because you have a different set of rules. So we have looked a lot at this, and this is one of the things that too in our concierge service we're going to help you understand is how the billing should work and how do you do this and how do we make sure that you're covering your cost. So other questions about how the charging for charging works. It's also just really weird to have the same word mean two different things in the same sentence. And we keep trying to figure out, is it accepting payment? Is it a fee for use? We don't know. So charging for charging is kind of what I've landed on for now. What mechanisms of EV charging cost recovery is most common in multifamily space? Right now, what we're seeing, again, this is pre-law, is that when it's a dedicated parking spot, we can tie it to that person's meter and they just pay for it as part of the utility bill. We have also seen multifamily properties charge people like $30 a month to use that, just like, and treat it like another amenity that they would have on their property. We also have multifamily properties that use swipe per pay. They've contracted with someone like ChargePoint. ChargePoint has put the charging stations in, ChargePoint collects the fees, and the multifamily property is just providing the site. So there are a bunch of different ways. And what we haven't talked about is some of the other cost recovery, which has to come with carbon credits. And that's like a whole different webinar all on its own. But there are other ways to cover your costs. All right. I think I answered the question that I see in here. How does the property get reimbursed for the resident charging sessions? Again, sometimes it's tied to the meter. Sometimes it's a flat fee. If you are working with a vendor and the vendor collects the fees, you're not going to get reimbursed, but it is going to cover the electricity. And there are ways that you can also look at service contracts. So let's say you put in charging stations and you want somebody to make sure that they're always working and to answer the phone call in the middle of the night when it's not working. You would work that out with your vendor, and in exchange for that service, that vendor may say, I'm going to keep the fees. You just become a person who is operating. It's almost like putting a coffee kiosk in your parking lot, and you're saying we're letting this other person offer this service, and this thing is good for coffee kiosk is not good for the environment. It's good for me, but we're doing this because it's part of our overall greenhouse gas reduction plan, and we want to encourage our folks to drive electric vehicles, and we see benefits of this. I would also say if you're a property owner, one of the other benefits for this is it gives you charging stations for your own fleet. If you have vehicles that are your own maintenance vehicles or running between properties or picking things up, this gives you a great way to also support your own fleet. So I see that we are coming to the end of our time, and I think I have one more slide. Nope, we are back over to Central Coast is going to talk to you for a minute about some of the incentives, and then we'll have more time to talk.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. And I think Osvaldo, you're going to take it from here, correct?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff and Chris. Very quickly, just before we end the presentation, we want to just provide some information about existing programs where you can get some money back for certain qualifying purchases, whether that relates to an electric vehicle, an electric charging station, or even all electric housing. So to begin, we have a program right now called Electrify Your Ride, which provides money back for the purchase of an electric vehicle. In the case of multifamily housing, that would be up to 5 vehicles. We also provide some money back for the installation of chargers. That includes any of the electrical work that went into installing that charger, such as upgrading your electric panel. This year, we're offering a lot more incentives for our multifamily housing developers, or property managers or owners, better said. And if you would like to learn more, you can click on our website, and you can learn all about the incentives that we offer for you. Again, the incentives are a lot higher for multifamily housing properties, so we're really looking forward to folks in this space looking to apply for these funds. Again, if you have any questions as well, you could always reach out to us to clarify anything that's not clear on the website. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Ozzy, we actually did get a question before we move on. I just want to address this question from Tom White. We got a question. How does the property get reimbursed for the resident charging sessions? I just want to make sure.
I think Chris did address that.
Oh, I'm sorry. It popped up. I apologize. I will let you finish, Ozzy.
No worries. This is the other program we offer. It's called the New Construction Electrification Program. And it is a program that provides incentives to our developers to build all electric affordable housing. It includes farm worker housing as well as our accessory dwelling units. We like to call them ADUs. In this program, you can get up to $2,500 in incentives if you are building for affordable housing or all electric farm worker housing. And you can get $5,000 per unit if you are building ADUs. The limit for this project is $240,000. That's $240,000 per project site. To clarify what I said earlier, it's $2,500 in incentives per unit, up to $240,000 per project site. Just like the Electrify Your Ride program, this program is already live. We are already accepting applications on a first come, first serve basis. Please feel free to check out our website. We will be sharing it in the link as a link in the chat. And again, reach out to us if you guys have any questions. We're more than happy to work with you guys in this program.
Hey, Ozzy, we have a couple of questions for you in the Q&A. What's the affordability requirements to qualify? Does it have to be 100% affordable?
I could take that. So the answer to that is yes. For the multifamily housing 2,500 per unit incentive, that does have to be an affordable housing unit. It has to be title restricted. We're not at this time offering incentives for market rate multifamily units. I do want to make a clarification. The ADU incentive that we have, the 5,000 per ADU, that is for our private homeowners, and it is basically we are offering up to two of those incentives per project site for private property owners. So that's a little bit different from the sort of the housing developer incentive offering that we have. That's 2,500 per unit.
And Dan, Bilal has some very specific questions for you, and I wonder if you could click the Q&A and maybe answer those specifically for them.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ozzy, back to you.
I'm going to leave it there. I put the links in the chat if anybody's interested in learning more about the programs. Again, you could also just reach out to us through the email addresses that you see on the website, and we can work with you once we get those emails.
I also just wanted to quickly clarify in case one of the questions was referring to existing multifamily buildings. We have a separate program that Oswaldo did not address today. That's called Electrify Your Home, that can help support and provide incentives for building owners, homeowners that are seeking to electrify end uses in existing single family and multifamily buildings.
Okay,
Thanks.
we did have one more slide left. Did anybody need to speak to this?
That is me. So
Okay.
thanks so much. We actually, I think, have 2 more left. So you heard me allude to we will help you. And this is where the we will help you comes in. So you are the first group of people to hear about a new program from Central Coast Community Energy, and that's our Concierge Services. And some of you who are on here, I recognize names like Tom. And we're excited to be working with you on this. So what this program is tailored support to help you plan for and install EV charging stations at your existing properties. This is the 5 simple steps for what to do and how we're going to help you. So the first thing is we're going to show you in a few minutes where the application is. You'll complete the really short application on the website, comes into us, and then we're going to arrange a short phone interview with you. And that, again, is just to get a little bit more detail about your goals and what we need to think about with your property and what you're thinking about, your timeline, and what your ideal situation is. Then we'll come out and take a look at your property. We're going to send one of our engineers out who will work with your electrician to look at your existing parking lot layout and what does your panel look like and what do we have there for a feasibility study. Once we've done that, we're going to create a drawing for you, and that drawing is something that you can use to go out and get construction bids. So those bids, those are things that we can help you get the bids, or if you have contractors that you already work with, you'll be able to do that as well. Now I gotta put a little, even though this shows a short line, it's not quite a short line. Between that property visit and that bids and installation, we're going to do our research about incentives. Now, you just heard about the incentives to Central Coast Community Energy. There are also other incentives for charging stations, and we're going to make, sometimes they work together, sometimes one is better than the other for you, sometimes they don't work together, but we're going to know what incentives you're qualified for. And then when we do that part for the bids and installation, we're going to make sure that whatever you're getting adheres to that incentive program. So sometimes they say thou shalt use this type of equipment or a person who has this type of certification. So we'll make sure that everything qualifies. And then we're going to help you apply for the rebate or the incentive. And if it's multiple, we'll help you with multiple. But we'll make sure that you have done everything that you need to do, that you're doing it at the right time, that you have all the documentation that you need to have so that we can process that really quickly. So sometimes you might not need all 5 steps. Sometimes it might be way more work on number 3, and sometimes it might be a lot of help with number 5. So it's very much a program that works the way that you want to work and will help you no matter where you are. So whether you are ready to start like today, let's get going, or you are still in the exploration phase, we have some very specific next steps for you. So Jeff, if you could move on to that last slide.
There is a question on the
New development.
Yeah. How do you provide concierge services for new developments?
And John, I'm going to have you answer this one.
Sure. So I think the way that this is set up is that it can accommodate inquiries or customers that are seeking to do new construction or existing buildings, and the pathway is going to be based upon that.
I would take support here from Dan as well. As far as new construction, it would interplay with our new construction electrification program, which is not specifically geared towards EV charging infrastructure. It's more geared towards supporting developers electrify the 4 common end uses in a building or in a unit. Those include cooking, domestic hot water, heating, and laundry. However, that program and this program can work together via this concierge service to support folks that are interested in integrating EV charging infrastructure into design and development of new construction as well. It'll be a new space for us, and we're happy to support it.
Okay.
And Terry, when you fill that application out, it's going to ask you if it's in a new building or an existing building, and we're going to get you the right support. All right, so let's hit that last slide. These are your next steps, where to go from here and what to do. So we have already linked to you the page for Electrify Your Ride. In fact, I think you may have gotten it a few times, which is great. So when you're on that page, you will see a tab that says Concierge Service. If you are ready to start, ready to go, want to have a phone call this week, fill out that application and let's get going. If you still have a few questions, you can contact your account rep. I'm going to drop my email in here at the end. You can email directly. We'll discuss where you are and figure out what the next step is for you. If you want some more information, on that same page under Concierge Service, you're going to see some toolkits. These are many of the things that I just talked to you about. It's a survey that you can use with your tenants or residents. It is some checklists, it's some thought patterns, it's some more detail about ADA. And you can use that as a point to start getting some more information. And then come back when you're ready. This is a long-term program. It is not a do it this week and it's gone forever. You guys, like I said, are the first to hear about it. And then if you have a question, ask it now. We have a few minutes left. And I see one in the Q&A. Oh, this is still for I think still for you, Dan, about the construction program. And Tom asked if we're aware of car sharing providers for residents who don't want to buy or lease but need access to occasional rides. I am, Tom, and you and I should talk about that afterward. There are a couple that are really good. You know, Gig is in Sacramento area and some of the Bay Area. And then there is a newer one, and I have, for some reason, the name has just gone out of my head. There's a newer program that's starting with car sharing as well. So, Tom and I know each other, so we can chat about that afterwards. But yeah, I really love the Mobility Hub car sharing programs too.
All right. Any final questions? All right. Well, thank you, Chris, and the rest of our panel, the programs team. This is our contact information here, and I believe Jenna put in mine and Sophia's contact information as well. And so she handles the northern section, which is Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito, or I handle San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. If you have any questions about this or anything else, feel free to reach out to us and we'll get you connected to the right people. And let's see, any last minute questions or comments from our panel?
I do have one piece of information I'd like to ask for everybody. We'd sure like to know if you found this to be helpful or interesting, and if you would like to see further webinars about this topic or other topics. How can we use this platform to support you going forward? So we'd love to have your feedback on that, whether it's in the chat right now or and maybe if there's something that you'd like us to cover in early December, a topic that you would like to see. So either type in the chat, send us an email. I dropped my email in the chat as well. And I also want to really thank you for your time and attention today. It means a lot to us. and interaction. Loved all the questions.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Everybody have a great day. We're right on time.
Thank you.